It's a pleasure to share some of my research with you today. I'd like to acknowledge the Darkinjung people, the traditional custodians of the lands and waters of the Central Coast of New South Wales, Australia, where I am today. And I'd also like to acknowledge the assistive technology practitioners and the older and disabled end users who contribute to the study and the findings. Smart technology offers more than tools to help save money and improve efficiency. It's gradually becoming a crucial part of the lives of consumers and business leaders. And much of this can be attributed to increased access to 5G, artificial intelligence, government regulations, and advancements in the internet. When you look at the broad definition of smart technology, data is at the core. It involves interconnectivity, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and extensive data analysis. The research that was undertaken in this project looks at how smart home assistive technology can be best used in both aged care and disability sectors to reduce the need for support services. It included an assessment of ease of use, quality of life, and cost-benefit analysis, and hopefully contributes to the development of policy options in Australia in terms of the smart home assistive technology. Quite a large team, as you'll see, and it's a free online publication which can be downloaded from the Australian Housing Urban Research Institute, which funded the project. So in understanding the implications of new and emerging assistive technologies for older people and people with disabilities, there were 4 key research questions. The first was, what was the current and emerging directions in the development of assistive technologies globally and nationally? And this was primarily a literature review. The second question was to do with the current policy directions in disability and ageing care in Australia and internationally. And again, this was primarily a literature review, but often involved a look at grey literature, which is sometimes difficult to get hold of. The third research question was to do with the factors that enable or constrain the use of assistive technology to support independent living in practice. So we used a survey. We did photojournalism, we did interviews with participants, and we also had focus groups. Pardon me. The fourth question was to do with the potential economic and social benefits, and in this case, we had an economist assist with that based on our survey findings. So just to understand what we considered a smart home in terms of assistive technology was how the smart system, things like Google Assistant, Amazon Alexa or Cortana, operated in terms of control interfaces, Wi-Fi connectivity with the devices that were installed around the home. So these included smart switches, smart bulbs, electrically operated windows, electrically operated water cutoff or plumbing cutoffs, smart fridges, automatic cutoffs for electricity and stoves, and again, things like smart music and other entertainment and TV systems. So, I mean, this, if you like, gels with the definition by Bierhoff, which was to do with interdependent assistive technological devices that communicate through a wired or wireless connection, continuously modifiable to the needs of the user. So the literature, which I referred to earlier, revealed a number of known vulnerabilities, particularly for older people. So I guess there were 5 of those. The first 3 involved the risk of data privacy, security, and unethical practices. And this is something which makes vulnerable people more vulnerable if it's not considered in the deployment and design of the smart devices. And some people may, for instance, have heard of the Ring phone hacking that happened, which enables people to view people who are arriving at the door, for instance. The data vulnerabilities and lack of transparency on how data is managed, stored and protected, particularly within apps, is an increasing concern. And again, where people are giving away private data, which could potentially result in things like identity theft, that's of great concern, or where older people might have financial abuse. And again, privacy and consent from secondary users. So where you have retirement homes, where you have strata units, etc., and where smart home internet devices are used, privacy issues and tensions can also arise beyond the primary user. I guess another example of this would be we have a care provider who has to code things in or attend to things on behalf, or a family member who has to attend to things on behalf of the more vulnerable person. So care replacement is also an issue because as smart home assistive technology becomes increasingly promoted and adopted, the ethical considerations on how this potentially reduces or otherwise impacts normal face-to-face provisions has been raised as a concern for both users and family members. And again, I guess there's an issue about one size fits all, which is the last important part. And mass consumer smart home can be seamlessly integrated, but it could also make participants feel that they're living in a more standardised dwelling, or where there's a risk in assuming that everyone has the same out-of-box experience. And in fact, we know, and I'll talk more about that's a serious problem for people with disabilities and for people with cognitive impairment in particular. So I think one way of understanding some of the findings is to talk about some of the case studies. So Richard is an example of a smarter multifamily apartment living person. He has severe macular degeneration and started using smart technology when his wife was diagnosed with a neurodevelopmental illness a few years prior to the research. She had died at the time we did the interview, and his story includes several upgraded versions. And I think that's an ongoing issue because, as you're aware, technology is constantly changing. So an example in his case is that the Apple waterproof version was offered, and he switched to that model because it enabled him to have additional things, including fall detection, and it enabled him to use it while in the shower. Richard and his son were both, before the advent of his diagnosis and his wife's increasing frailty, liked technology. And because of his macular degeneration, being legally blind, the voice control was particularly important for him. So Richard had a lot of help from his son, who actually lived in the flat below. And slowly his network of smart devices increased. So he ended up with temperature sensors, a CCTV, 2 Google Mini HomePods, his Apple Watch, and his iPhone, as well as a Google Mini HomePod. Most of the devices were less than 2 years old, with the exception of his wife and his pre-existing iPads. And that was quite common in the findings because a lot of older people, although they aren't always readily adopters of iPhones or smartphones, they do like Kindles and iPads because they can communicate with family and share photos, etc. In Richard's case, it was the voiceover which described exactly what was happening on the screen and which accommodated his vision impairment and the magnifier, which were particularly important. So I guess that gives you a snapshot of one of our users. In terms of user evaluation, unsurprisingly, the highest satisfaction scores were for comfort, ease of use, and product durability. So these are the things that consumers are looking for. But they had a lot of problems with after-sales items of follow-up service and also professional services. So a lot of people that are advising about these services, such as therapists or aged care workers, actually have quite limited information and may not be up to date. Comfort was rated at 95% for people who had actually purchased these devices, and satisfaction in terms of their personally selected devices was 91%. And they thought just over 80% in terms of the meeting their needs and reducing care. In terms of quality of life, it was clear that it did improve quality of life. And we can see in the before and after for our users that in all cases, the quality of life for independent living, for relationships, for mental health, and for the senses, particularly, I guess, vision and hearing, were improved. Which is actually quite a significant finding. So in terms of the economic perspective, what we can see is that because the government support is quite limited and difficult to find, that most of the people who we interviewed were in fact self-funders. So they were buying the products themselves from local shops. And there was some evidence of plausible cost savings, but there was a very high variation in product ranges, functionality, quality, etc. And I guess the takeaway was that the profit out-of-the-box plug-and-play advantage that many smart technology products boast is not always the case. So to look at some of the quotes, disability service providers said things like, I think for older people it's very complicated. Insurance and care providers said, we don't work with just any installer. We only work with people who know how to customise the technology. Housing providers said someone with cognitive disabilities have problems with remembering the commands. And disability service providers said that nobody's really funded to support people with this. And I think that's something that's very important to remember. There are a number of barriers to dealing with smart home assistive technology. So there's clearly an information gap characterised by lack of clarity about the role of funders, housing designers, housing providers, and for individuals with functional limitations in their knowledge and skills. There's a clear lack of coordination, regulation, guidance, and an absence of an evidence base about what works for who. And in commercial aged care and disability housing, they only reported uptake of smart home assistive technology policies where there was a market advantage. So in other words, towards where they were able to market to wealthier consumers. And purely government-funded ones or social providers generally were unable to provide this. They just weren't funded to. In terms of assistive technology policy in Australia, as we saw, there were some potential economic as well as quality of life satisfaction gains, particularly in the residential housing sector and for smart home suppliers. However, Australian policy in this area is quite fragmented and is incapable of delivering at the population level. And at the same time, service supports for bespoke arrangements are also lacking. There is no national oversight of the assistive technology, and in Australia, that's particularly problematic because we have a split between our National Disability Support Program and our aged care reform. So they both have quite different policies and quite different funding arrangements. And so that impacts anything that you might need in terms of if you acquire a disability over the age of 65, for instance. There is no whole of system review that impacts things like tax or housing and health, and it cuts all of these streams, which is quite problematic. So there is a need for much greater policy coordination. So the lack of clear policy frameworks and insufficient coordination has resulted in Australia in an ad hoc and piecemeal implementation, and this really needs to be addressed. In terms of recommendations for practice, there's a lack of awareness, and again, non-existent service and policy standards. There's a lack of consumer-driven demand. Again, older people and people with disabilities are often unaware of what could be done. So as we saw in Richard's case study, it really largely depended on his liking for technology and the fact that he had a technology-savvy son who wanted to help him with this. Practitioners are clearly looking for more clarity and want education. And practitioners need to actively generate policy proposals that are technically, economically and politically feasible in order to get the funding, particularly in the housing and care environments. So I guess the research that we did shows that the success of assistive technology requires a more integrated approach from the design of the physical environment to the inclusion of care provision in a more holistic way. And part of the problem is that the plethora of choices will require best practice frameworks and richer knowledge exchange across disciplines. You can't assume that the housing designers and the care providers are talking the same language. And if we don't address that, then we're unable to leverage the newer technologies. And again, I think we also need to have some conversations with the people developing the apps and technology so that they better address things like integration, customization, and make it easier for consumers. So I'm more than open to questions, and I'm very happy for you to keep in touch. My email is below, and if you're interested in some of the information and research on home modifications in more general, there's a link for that as well. Thank you very much, and I look forward to being able to answer questions.
Thank you, Catherine, for your comprehensive review on introducing the use of assistive technology and its impact. Now we have some questions from the audience to Catherine. Hi. Hello, Catherine. So we have some questions coming from the audience. So the first question is, what is your recommendation to developers when they decide these assistive technologies according to the needs of different people?
I think it's a good question. And I think the developers need to be very clear about who they're providing the technology to. Plus, they also need to be aware of how people might be purchasing or being provided with the technology, and then how the technology is supposed to be put together as part of an ecosystem in a home. So is it a single work-alone component, or is it something that communicates with other devices? And if it communicates or interacts with other devices, it's very important that they work together and that the software upgrades or changes to the software don't disable other parts of the system.
I see. Thank you. And the second question is, many potential users are reluctant to buy these assistive technology as they are not funded maybe by the government or other resources, particularly for those who are aging in place. So how can we motivate them to use these technologies?
Well, I do think it's very important that there are peer groups that help people. So they've been quite successful in Australia, for instance. So in getting older people more comfortable, having another older person who's using the equipment and finding it helpful is a great way to start someone off. But I think a bigger problem is knowing what exists and knowing how it might help you. And for that reason, one of the recommendations we made in our report was that people providing care and family members also need to have access to information.
I see.
One way we tried to deal with some of these problems in a slightly different context in Australia was to produce an app at point of sale. So where a potential end user can understand how the system might work.
I see. And what you mentioned about is the peer group, or also that actually helps them to make an educated and also informed choice, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I think that is. I think that's why you have friends, so that they can help you to maybe recommend you to a better product as well. We have another questions on. You talk about fragmented policy. I think it happens a lot all around the world, actually. Fragmented policy and lack of national oversight were key issues hindering the adoption and development of assistive technology. Apart from government, how different stakeholders can actively contribute to solve this issue?
Well, there are sort of organisations like Technical Assistance for Disability, who are voluntary organisations which could step up in this space. At the moment, they haven't done very much in this space. And again, I guess most countries, including Hong Kong, has centres where older people congregate for meals or for, to play mahjong, and Chinese chess or Go. And again, that's a place where if they had maybe somebody coming in to promote these things, even if it was a supplier. So in Australia, Harvey Norman is a large supplier which has government contracts for the National Disability Insurance Scheme. They were one of the people we spoke to. And again, if it is going to be out of the private purse of families and not in government, then making sure that families and individuals that might use the equipment have an opportunity to, to play and experience this stuff in a safe setting is a good idea, I think.
Great. What you mentioned is exactly probably our council is doing, and also we are also is trying to put together with the community effort as well. I think that helps a lot. I guess that's what you mean, and what you have mentioned about community and also how these groups go together. One question from the audience is, does the current Livable Housing Australia program mention anything on the use of assistive technology? If not, any potential scope to include?
I think that's a fantastic question, and it's a very timely question because it doesn't. Livable housing is primarily just about some very simple changes to the build and construction of new housing. And it's not even adopted in every state in Australia at the moment, even though it's in the National Construction Code. But it's completely silent about assistive technology, and that's a problem.
I see. So what you mentioned, I guess, is will be a lot of efforts in collaborating in between, like no matter it's the government program or even private companies to work together so that we can build better houses, right?
Yeah, and in Australia we have a problem as well in terms of, as they do in Greater China, but maybe not so much in Hong Kong, where rural and remote communities generally don't have as good access to internet. In our case, it's the NBN program, and therefore they have slower download speeds, they have less opportunities to interact with suppliers, all that sort of stuff.
I see. So that's the geographical limitation actually will deter people from using these types of assistive technology. So I think that will be, will take some of the community, what you mentioned about just earlier, about properly building community first, and then letting them to get to have some educated and also choices. So I guess that's all the questions that we have from the audience. Thank you for your input and also presentation. We wish to see you in person one day in our expo.
No, I would love to come, and I greatly regret not being able to come to Hong Kong this time. It's a long time since I was there. I think I was there just before handover.
Okay, thank you. We hope to see you later. Thank you very much. Bye.
Good day, and thank you so much for joining me today, everyone. I'm very excited to join you all and explain what's happening with aging in place with technology in Australia. Got some slides to share with you, and I hope that my presentation brings some value and shares what we have learned in Australia, and hopefully it will be of use to everyone in Hong Kong. So thank you again for joining me. The most important thing to start our presentation with is it's customary in Australia to acknowledge your traditional landowners. So I'd like to take the opportunity to do that. The reason being is in Australia, we have the longest living civilization on the planet, and their traditions and their connection to the land is really important to us and our relationship with them as people moving forward. So I would like to take this opportunity to that acknowledgement of country. And while I do, I hope you enjoy the beautiful imagery of Australia, and hope you can join us one day soon. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country throughout Australia and recognise their connection and continuing connection to the water and the communities of our land. Indigo's head office is based in Perth, Western Australia. As such, we recognise and acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and thank them for letting us occupy their land. Thank you. So I'd like to start the presentation on assistive technology with the importance of technology. I'm going to do something a little bit different to what you're normally told, and I'd like everyone to get out their mobile phones. Here's mine there. And what I'd like you to do is pull your phone out, and you're welcome to scan the QR code if you would like to. This device, this mobile phone, mine, I don't know if you can see it very clearly on the camera, but my mobile phone for me represents my connection to my family. It has photos of my children. I'm originally from the United Kingdom, Northern United Kingdom, Newcastle upon Tyne, and this mobile phone allows me in Australia to connect with the people I love. This mobile phone helps me get up for work every single day. I have my alarm on it. It reminds me to take medication. It has my shopping list. It helps me fulfill my work. I can check my emails. I can go on Facebook and LinkedIn. This is an invaluable device for me and how I can live my world and connect with the people I love, the people that I work with, and do the things that are important to me as a human being. So that leads us into assistive technology, what we do at Indigo with our Geek2Go and NED program. So what is assistive technology? It's a word we use in Australia. It's not one that I was overly familiar with prior to working in technology. I've always worked in healthcare, predominantly neuro. But assistive technology is the equipment and the devices we use every single day that allow people to have a really great quality of life. On the image, you can see things like a shower chair, continence pads, self-pouring kettles, wheelchair and walking frame. All of our services that we provide at Indigo have a connection to these products, whether it's face-to-face service delivery or whether it is digital platforms and e-commerce solutions that acknowledge the importance of these devices. So while I talk about assistive technology, I want to bring you back to your phone. That's your assistive technology that's meaningful to you. And these pieces of equipment and technology are meaningful to our end users and help them live the best life, whether they have a disability, pediatric or aged care need. They're really important pieces of equipment that really help independence. So Indigo as a company, we've been established for over 40 years, and we were priorly known as the Independent Living Centre, a not-for-profit agency. We've developed in that time into an independent not-for-profit, and we deliver technological solutions to AT and face-to-face services. We have our national equipment database, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And we also have the Geek2Go program, which is an Australian government funded program that potentially has capability to be used in other countries with different government funding. So they're what I'm going to talk about today. Ned and Geek2Go. Slide. So our purpose, we definitely focus on allied health support. We understand the value of clinicians in supporting the work we do, and we provide support in people's homes as well as technology. So we do driver solutions and assessment, we do home modifications, we do allied health prescription of goods. But on top of that, we do digital transformation, which is what I'm here to talk about today. And here's some images of the wonderful work that our staff do every single day. So why is independent living important? You know, we're all in the same boat. Globally, we have a population of people who are aging, and they also want to age in place. We don't have a demographic anymore of where people are necessarily seeking support. They really want to be independent and fulfill their life's goals and purposes, and they really want to have that important quality of life attached to what they do. And it's our jobs as therapists and clinicians and managers to try accommodate those needs and find the best way to provide a really good quality of life to people in the community. So what we know is that people want to stay at home for longer, and we know that there's cost efficiencies in that if it's done correctly. And globally, the World Health Organization, which is on the next slide as well, are very aware of the fact that assistive technology is really finding a place. It's really finding solutions for people to stay at home longer, have quality of life, have independence, and really have things that are meaningful to their well-being and their holistic needs as an individual. So we're really focused on keeping people out of care when it's not required, but also if people are moving into care as they age, we can give helpful tools and things that really help people stay independent and support the staff when they have a lot of people to look after in one place. So AT from a global perspective, as I mentioned just prior, the World Health Organization has estimated that 1 billion people globally need assistive technology and will need at least one piece of equipment by 2030. What we've found through the funding we have is that people, once they access assistive technology and see the value it adds to their life, they access it more. So it's breaking down those barriers and allowing people the opportunity to trial equipment, aids, technology that really assist in their well-being, in their lifestyle, and it's fitted to the environment. You know, not every piece of equipment fits every person, and equally it doesn't fit every environment. So it's really important that the goods that are prescribed or the goods that people choose to get is done in an educated and a well-intended fashion, and any kind of government support for funding to do that is really integral in raising awareness of how assistive technology can support individuals and their loved ones in a better life trajectory. So Indigo, in regards to the Geek2Go program, we worked really closely with the Australian government to understand the gap in the market around goods, equipment and assistive technology, or GEET as we call it. And we are focused on delivering services to people who are aging in place, who are aging and also are classified in the aged care bracket. So it's really important that we take a holistic view of the person and their needs, and we find ways to use assistive technology to support them in their independence, in their function and their well-being. And the important part of that is when it's done well, it's a really great outcome for the individual, because they have this equipment to use day in, day out. And it means that other intervention is not necessitated. So we found that the best way we could support the government was to have a wraparound service that was funded by them to offer people assistive technology and equipment in their home, so that they could then use that equipment to be more independent and to give them a better quality of life. So we were chosen to be the panel member, the representative of the Australian government in To Go, and we developed a service called GIES. The program has been exceptionally successful. We only had a few $1 million of funding in the first year while we trialed, adapted our product, but also made sure that people had meaningful outcomes. And to date, we've now received over $35 million worth of funding, and that grows all the time. Last month alone, we did over $3 million worth of transactions of products in 1 month. So you can see the scale of when people are exposed to the value of assistive technology and equipment, they're really engaged and it's really meaningful for them. So as you can see, we've delivered over 40,000 pieces of assistive technology to over 23,000 people across Australia. We also focused really heavily on ensuring that our product wasn't just available in set environments. And what I mean by that is Australia is such a large country. It's absolutely huge. And there's a lot of people who live in the rural and remote areas of Australia where they don't have the ability to have therapists and specialists and doctors at the beck and call. It's something that's very rare to them. So what's really important is that as a service Geek2Go, we're able to deliver goods to their doorstep, and they have access to continence pads, wheelchairs, walking frames, which really empowers them to live a really well-rounded life in even the most remote parts of the world. So I'm currently in WA, and we're the most remote city in the world. So we've really overcome some of those geographical barriers by having this service online as a technology solution. And our satisfaction rate, well, it speaks for itself, and we're very proud of that. So Geek2Go was a government-funded program that the government gave us to deliver these goods. But we already had NED. So NED is the National Equipment Database for Australia, NED. And what NED is it is an online catalogue or repository of information that has over 20,000 products available. And the products are not just available from an informational perspective, that also it is an e-commerce and digital platform. So we have information on NED about what a product is, how to use it. It has all the measurements. And that online platform is an information platform. It is an educational platform, which Allied Health across Australia use, but also the government have utilised for the e-commerce component of it. So we teamed up Geek2Go with NED, and we made a beautiful marriage of a delivery of a service to the government, an individualised service to the end user of AT, and then NED, which acts as a sale platform. And we were very proud for NED to win the Accessibility Initiative of the Year award. And we've also just recently been finalists in the Insight Awards. So we're really trying to progress how people access assistive technology. And we would like to think that one day we will be the Amazon of AT in Australia. And we're already forging that ground as we speak. Still under development, but a really good way there. So we're very proud of NED. So what's really important is GIES2Go serve a very similar purpose. They're funded very differently. GIES2Go is block funded by the government. NED is funded by individuals. So we have a disability scheme and aged care scheme where people get money to them individually, and they can also access this money and this platform. So we want to increase the quality of life for people as they age, and they want to age in place. We know people want to stay in their homes, and we want to make that a reality. That's really important to us, to give people choice and control and decision-making powers over their own lives. And this technology allows them to do that. And the data that we're collating currently, it really proves that we are able to delay admission into aged care facilities. We're also able to prevent burns, falls, accidents, which therefore means we are reducing the loading on the hospital system. So we're not having people bed blocking the hospitals when actually preventative measures could have prevented that from occurring in the first place. We're also a resource to clinical allied health staff and specialists. And what we do is we consult with them, we understand the needs, and we try to translate that into content. And we're actually in the process of revamping the National Equipment Database to include a lot of this information that therefore frees up our allied health staff. So in Australia, we have a prevalent issue of not having enough therapists, not having specialist staff, not having skilled staff available to go into people's home and fulfill every area in scope of practice, because it's just not possible, because our population continues to age, they continue to have needs. So what we're trying to do is make a lot of that knowledge, that really important information readily available. And what that then means is the specialist allied health staff, the social workers, the OTs, the speech pathologists, the doctors, the nurses, they are then freed up to really address, treat, and support the people most in need. And we are building a digital e-commerce platform that really supports holistically the needs of our aging population. So we're very grateful to the Australian government for the funding they provided to us and the faith they gave us in making this a reality. In addition, we're very proud of the team who built the National Equipment Database, which started as a handwritten catalogue 40 years ago. And over that time, we've developed into a real need in the market, a real gap. And the beautiful thing about what we've done is, with government support, with funding, but more importantly, with an absolute desire to deliver assistive technology, we've managed to bring together over $3 million worth of sales per month to support the most vulnerable people in our community. And that money continuously is re-injected into the platform. It provides an opportunity for us to support our allied health resources, who are so precious. And these things are capable and possible in all of the countries. There's other countries who have versions of what we do, but we're really proud of our Australian success story in the regards of we are taking AT to people's doorsteps. We've managed to build GIES2Go to $3 million worth of sales per month in partnership with NED during COVID, during strikes, during sanctions, and we've still delivered on our need. And I think what that shows is when your general public, when your population of elderly people are really looking for tangible solutions, they are possible. But you need to advocate and make sure that you have an opportunity to support them and make them a reality. So I'm really thankful to have had this opportunity to share the work we've done at Indigo. Indigo is the company, and our products are GIES2Go and NED. And I hope that this presentation provides some great inspiration. I'd like to thank the audience in Hong Kong. Thank you for having me present today. And again, I'd like to pay my respects to the elders, the Whadjuk and the Noongar people on which our lands reside. And I'd like to thank you very much for your time. My contact details are support@AskNed, best way to get me in a communal inbox. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions, but thank you for your time. And I hope this gives you some ideas of potentially the grounds you can break into the future. Thank you.
So thank you, Bernie, for your presentation and the input, and what a great and the effort of Integral is amazing, and especially it goes extra miles to the community who are actually far from the city center, I guess, right?
Yes, yeah, very, very far, very remote. I'm based in WA. We're the most remote city in the world. So the logistics around servicing people with allied health support it can be really limiting and very difficult. So assistive technology really provides people with that level of independence and reduces the workload on the allied health and specialist clinical staff. So it has a really great value to us here, particularly with the scale of the country, but certainly relevant to all other countries as well, including Hong Kong.
Just just curious about have Integral or yourself actually faced reluctance from the community you are serving, hope to serve when you first introduced the technology to them?
I think the community didn't fully understand the value that assistive technology could bring to people. So I think with in more modern times, with the emergence of mobile phones with alarms on them, reminders, the emergence into the market of robot vacuum cleaners, those type of progressions in mainstream industry have really helped with people understanding the value that technology can bring. So I think more recently, people have a greater understanding of technology more generally and how it can help you. So translating that over into assistive technology hasn't been as hard as I would say it had been perhaps a decade ago. So I think people are much more comfortable to accept support, even if that is in the form of technology, if it means they can age in their own home and not have to go into residential care as early. So it seems to have been very well adopted and actually very well supported. And we do have trends where when people access technology, one piece of assistive technology, they tend to really embrace it and access a lot more. So it's that education piece from the therapist is a crucial component of acceptance of assistive technology.
I see, and I think that will create another community that start using your the service, and then they probably the peers in between them, and then they will probably teach each other using those technology as well. Well, we have some questions from the floor. The first question is under the Get2Go program, can applicants receive more than one device when they have multiple needs? Is there a limit to the amount of funding per person?
That's a great question. So there is limited funding that is dictated by the Australian government. Currently, that's $1,000 per person per year. But there is an opportunity for clients to purchase additional technology with their own funds. So specifically with Get2Go, the person has up to $1,000 to use per year, and it can be on one piece of equipment or 20 pieces. It just depends on their needs, and some products are prescribed by therapists, so that would be decided on by the therapist in conjunction with the client, and other times the client is allowed to self-choose.
I see. And the other question also about probably assessing on the needs. So any assessment from doctor or therapist is carried out before providing this device to the person in need. You may have covered that. Can you elaborate more on the assessment?
Yes, so the way it works is Australia has a regional assessment service. So they will go out to a person in their own home, and they will assess the person's need, and they will see, they will then prescribe equipment if it's appropriate, and they can access that funding. So the important component of that is that assistive technology needs to be assessed in the environment in which it will be used. So it's really important that where something needs to be prescribed, it's done in conjunction with the person in their environment where they intend to use the equipment, so that it's fit for purpose. So for example, the type of walk-in frame that you may suggest a person needs would depend very much on the environment in which it's being used in, and what type of ground it's going to be used on a regular basis. So yes, therapists do go out and assess, but if people purchase off the National Equipment Database, that's an online store, and they can just buy any piece of product they want, any assistive technology they wish.
I see. It also, so one question is on how does the Git2Go program confirm the equipment is that provided to the people who in need is properly used? For example, is there any like public education program and on communication program or platform that get so that they can be keep like equipped, also educated on how to use those tools that are provided by Git2Go?
Yes, so part of the Git2Go program, we issue the assistive technology to the individual, the customer, the client, and we then do follow up with the individual. They have a care plan, and we will obviously check in with them to check that the piece of equipment is fit for purpose and that it is being utilized. There is an option to return equipment if it's deemed unfit for purpose. So people can return goods if they're not utilized, but we have a 93% rate where the goods that have been prescribed or chosen are utilized by the individual. So we have a really good success rate. But it is really important that when you give people assistive technology, you do check it is being used, because overall, assistive technology overall has a very high abandonment rate. So it's really important that there is follow-up and that the assistive technology is being used, because if it's not being utilized, there's potential safety concerns for the person who's not using it. There's falls risks and things like that to consider.
And I think that is how you also as a reflective service to you all as well, that helps you to understand the latest needs or the trends of the people who are actually waiting in line for the support. One question on the database. So the LAD is a huge database of assistive technology. Is there any selection criteria to ensure the quality of the products?
Yes, so NED is unique in the regard that to join NED, you have to have an Australian business number, because we operate in Australia under Australian law. So the products have to be supplied by an Australian provider and meet the Australian standards. In addition to that, we also are moving forward partnering with a peer support group who actually do product reviews. So moving forward into the future, people will be able to read reviews that are done by people who use AT on the products themselves. And also as a safeguard measure, we obviously monitor any goods that are deemed unfit or at end of life. So when a product is deemed no longer fit for the Australian market, it is removed from the equipment database. So there's a number of ways that we safeguard clients by ensuring the Australian standards are met. And the final point worth noting is that in NED we have something called brand owners. So where there's distribution into Australia, there will be one brand owner of a product, which then may be sold by 10 or 15 different vendors. When they list on NED, the brand owner has to state that as the brand owner, they authorize the supplier selling their goods. So again, that's to stop anyone from imitating or copying assistive technology, and therefore trying to sell it. So we can prevent it that way by having the brand owner's approval that the suppliers stating they sell their goods are actually legitimate. So yes, there's a number of safeguards to protect our customers.
I think that actually comprise of a lot of wisdom in behind. I think we can learn a lot from that. We are also working currently on a platform like that, and a lot of my colleagues are working on such a database, and then hopefully to reach out to people who are needing this type of devices or assistive technology in Hong Kong. I guess you probably have learned a bit about it. Well, we hope to meet you in person one day, and definitely would love you to come to visit us to our the device center one day.
That would be absolutely wonderful. Yes, thank you very much. And if anyone's heading over to Australia, please let me know.
Thank you, Bernie, for your valuable sharing. And goodbye. Good day.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.